Hello, and welcome to Portfolio Matters. So, in today's podcast, we will be talking about the first of our angel investments to go bust. Now, reminder of the rules. All these stories are anonymized. The CEO is always called Charlie, and we make up all the other names, frankly. We don't want to be sued, but this story is in essence true. Now, I won't do a disclaimer, full disclaimer at the end. Reminder of the rules for SEIS and why we do angel investing is that tax breaks are extraordinary. So if you invest in the SEIS scheme, which is the first £250,000 of investment that goes into a company, 50% of that comes off your income tax bill. There's no capital gains to pay. If it's a success, you can get loss relief if it goes bust. We claim that in this case. And there's no inheritance tax, etc., etc. Okay, so lessons learned in this case. Well, at the end, we'll have this discussion about whether we got this wrong, and that was predictable, or whether we could have foreseen that this was going to be a disaster. But with hindsight, don't be beguiled by the numbers. Invest in the entrepreneur. Ultimately, you're investing in the CEO. Will he have the nous to be able to turn his original idea into success? And when things start to go wrong, can he adapt and, if necessary, tilt in a new direction? In this case, the CEO absolutely couldn't. And I would say that our experience of having IT professionals with a tech idea as the entrepreneur has not been positive. Would you say that's true, Richard?
Yeah, I would actually, Keith. I think, although, of course, there are some hugely successful companies that have been founded in just that way. But what we don't know is the ascertainment bias from those. I mean, Microsoft, for example.
Yeah.
But you don't know how many of these companies founded by techs have never seen the light of day, and what percentage actually make through to being successful. And I mean, the problem is that you need a lot of skills to successfully start a business, and understanding the tech is one of them, but you can actually buy that skill in.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. It's better to have a good entrepreneur who hires in the tech than to have a techie guy trying to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And what went wrong in this case was that initial revenue growth that we bought into just didn't continue. It is better to invest in a company where you can have small increments of growth, so lots of small customers, and build momentum, than just have one or two big customers, because in which case you're never sure whether they're going to get another customer. And actually, the most important thing is technology evolves very quickly. If you're investing in small companies, then their competitors could well be much better funded large tech companies. Unless you get momentum very quickly, you could be left behind. And that's absolutely what happened here. Also, if you're going to have an agreement of any kind with startup, get it down in writing, even if that's by email. In this case, we verbally agreed that I'd be investor but director, but it never happened. And I think I should have been more forceful with that. But as a result, we never really got as much of a handle on this business as we would have liked.
Having said that, Keith, the question is still, what influence could you have had as investor director?
And yeah, no, I agree with that.
When things go wrong, it's difficult to put it right from that position.
And as we go through this, you'll see that this went wrong. It seemed to go wrong incredibly quickly. And the final one is, we're going to call them tech trumps, but there are a lot of these startup incubators where, they hold a program and there's a big razzmatazz about getting in. And if you get in, then, they will invest, and it's like they will promote you and it's a great success, etc., etc. Well, getting on to tech trumps was a big double-edged sword, frankly. The CEO is a big ego trip for him, but he's out for 3 months on their special program. And at the end, they invested on very favorable terms. When this went bust, they got out with a profit, and that profit came at our expense. Reminder, we've changed all the names to protect the guilty. And so Planalot, not its real name, had developed planning software, so project planning software, and it was agile, which developers will understand, but it's a form of the way the software was meant to work. And this was SaaS, so software as a service model, with clients paying around £5 a month per user. And we first saw their presentation back in April 2017, when it had signed up a really impressive list of initial customers, actually, some big names, including the national broadcaster. And this was its actual revenues for the first 4 months of 2017. So revenues had gone from £125 in January to 9,373 in April, and it looked to be growing like a weed. And the number of companies had gone from 2 to 10, users from 25 to 1,875. So the initial numbers were really, frankly, pretty amazing. And when you look at the forecasts, so the forecasts were that they'd go from 9,373 recurring revenue in April to 75 grand by the end of the year, and they'd already be hugely in profit, frankly. By April, the company was already in profit. So you were looking at a company which, if they came in on forecasts, would be hugely profitable by the end of the year, and then extremely profitable in the coming years. And most of the new customers were coming in on free trials, but they'd already converted some to £5 a month. So in May, when we were looking to invest, the revenues had grown to 10 grand for April. Company was raising 200 grand, and they were going to spend 80% of that on recruitment to develop the platform and 20 on marketing. The pre-money valuation was 1.5 million. And given that it was forecasting to have profits of 5 million a year within 2 years, that actually seemed a very good valuation. So we saw Planalot via an angel introduction company, and they did the due diligence, checked that all the people who they said they were, etc., etc., and we trusted them to do that. Richard and I invested in the SEIS round, and I asked to be investor director, but that never happened. Post-investment, the company immediately hired a new COO, the Chief Commercial Officer.
So following on with Keith's story, all of the revenue growth was from a single big customer. Now, we have actually come across a couple of small companies looking for angel investment where they are very, very excited that they have a large customer, one large customer. And the difficulty with one large customer is that it's a very alluring prospect, because you think, well, if they've got one large one, they can get 50 large ones.
Yeah.
But actually, large customers, I think, trial stuff and give it a go. And that doesn't mean to say you've actually captured them. And the other thing is that the reason you've got a particular large customer may be quite idiosyncratic to that customer. And I remember this is a slight digression, but we looked at one company where they had software for, I think it was for analyzing their spreadsheet models, and they had got a large bank, multinational bank, and that was effectively, they were their only customer they ever got.
Mm.
And it didn't succeed because basically the bank paid for one-off use of the software. So
actually, before you go on, another story we will do in due course. We invested on the basis of strong initial revenue growth, again, because of one customer. And then it turned out, we were absolutely not aware of this, that the founders of the company had previously worked for the customer, and it had been a mate's deal. And, you just don't know how they've acquired this initial customer.
Indeed. And that mate's deal, at some point, someone spotted it and it all came to an end.
Yep.
So, but they found this large customer. They trialed it for the UK real estate division, who liked it, and the Danish office liked it, and the Mexican office trialed it, and of course the forecast revenues are enormous, and it looked like the business was actually really going to start flying now, and that we would start. And also, there were conversations. They were talking to other large customers who were interested. I think there were 4 or 5 that they'd approached on the back of this. So it looked like the thing was beginning to really gain a lot of traction. And then, as Keith said, Tech Trumps also spotted them as potential, and startup incubator. I wasn't sure that Charlie needed an incubator, a startup incubator. But as Keith said, the allure of having some additional money put in, and the ego stroking of being approved by them is, I think, quite difficult for a startup entrepreneur to resist. So he went through the 3-month intensive mentorship program. All the time, I remember going through this, there were sort of, yes, everything's going to be great, but it's not happening just yet. And I remember my sense of, where is this going? But without actually being able to put a finger on any particular problem. And of course, there's the big pitch event, which they always have at the end of these incubators, where the founder makes a presentation, and sort of everybody's happy and cheering, and everybody walks away with large quantities of investment because the potential investors like the company so much. But the only actually investment, I'm jumping ahead slightly here from the slide, the only actual investment was, as Keith said, the Tech Trumps investment, which effectively significantly diluted our shareholding, particularly in the event of the business failing. And the typical raise of 3 to 5, at a valuation of 3 to 5 million, simply didn't happen.
Yeah, but just describe the kind of graduation fundraising event for Tech Trumps. It was extraordinary. So they hired a theatre. You kind of got all these investors in the balcony and the grand circle looking down, and obviously the favored investors were down in the posh seats. And then you had pumping music. Everyone had to cheer and clap as people came on. And it was like, do I remember confetti and stuff? It was an extraordinary confection, this thing.
Yeah.
Trying to get everyone really enthusiastic about all the companies.
don't invest. I mean, a lot of these investors are very savvy people, and the ones who didn't invest in this company were clearly very savvy people.
Yes, rest of the country.
Yes, but it's trying to persuade people to invest on the wrong basis.
Yeah.
So anyway, but generally speaking, it was all going well, and there was potential for a great deal of investment. The concern was that I think the concern was that the business. It felt like the business was stalling.
Yeah. We still only basically had one customer,
Yeah.
but there were lots of trials going on.
And then, not long after Tech Trumps, Charlie let us know that he had terminated the chief technology officer. Charlie and Angelo were the original founders. I don't know. And I think, I mean, we met with Charlie, didn't we? In an office. So he moved to another service office. So we met him there, and so we went up the stairs into this. Basically, it was a bit like a room with no furniture except a table and a chair.
Mm.
It clearly wasn't his office. It was an office, and there was just him.
Yeah.
So this company now consists of one person who said that he had got rid of the CTO because all of the programming had been done wrongly. I remember the conversation, and I was thinking, well, how on earth did you let all the programming be done wrongly?
Yeah, he's meant to be a tech guy. And because what I remember about this whole period, Richard, was that every time we saw him, he'd be in a different location with fewer people. So fewer and different people.
Yeah.
He just could not retain staff, and everything was always other people's fault.
Yeah, there was never any there never appeared to be any self-reflection. So at that point, we were really quite sort of concerned that the business was actually going to fail.
And well, this is, but putting this in perspective, we'd invested in May. So this was like 4 months later.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think I was very concerned that the business wasn't going to be successful at that point because it was so many things didn't feel right about it. And then we had this update that there was a 6-figure license agreement with the financial services firm for 1,000 users per annum paid in advance. And there was still the trial continuing at the US office, where there was potential for a further 10,000 users, and a UK law firm trialing the software. Now, I think, with the benefit of hindsight, this was basically chum for the sharks to try and keep people happy, I think. And I suspect the pit situation wasn't really as rosy as depicted. Anyway, but from that point of view, it looks good. And there we go. Double the number of users to 2,000 starting January 2018, and other pilots going on starting in January 18. Bear in mind, this is effectively by one person who's doing all the selling, all of the software platform development, and who had rewritten the platform from scratch to accommodate the increased number of users. There was good news sort of coming out, but the actual business didn't really feel like at this point. Bearing in mind, we had invested. It was sunk money. We were basically floating corked bottles floating on the ocean. There was a lot of good news coming out, but the business didn't feel like it was actually had a huge amount of substance. This is looking back. This is with the benefit of hindsight as well.
Well, at the time, Richard, because I've been through all the updates, the pipeline looked really strong.
Yeah.
And our concern was really about him. And, the fact that every time you went to see him, the number of employees was falling.
Yeah, agreed. And I think Well, I mean, a seminal in my mind was that meeting we had with him, where basically it struck me that he had written the company consisted of only him, and this was
Yeah.
not the way that the business could succeed.
Moving on to April. So the sales pipeline then was that the UK financial services company had signed up to 90 grand already, and that should rise to 140 grand per annum from April. The US audit side of the same international business was signing on, and that looked great. And then you had all these big international companies who were on free trials or in conversation. And so when you looked at the sales pipeline, it looked really good. But stepping back, there was only one customer. There were loads of small customers. And again, the narrative always changed on that because previously he had been saying, got lots of small customers, we'll charge them, £5 a month, but, they'll add up. And then at some stage you said, oh, they're just not worth pursuing. They're more of a pain than they're worth revenue. I'm just going to go after the big customers.
Yep.
So moving on to July, frustrations. Not much is happening. There are lots of prospects, but nobody's actually signing up. And for the first time, he starts talking about competitors, how they are catching up and improving their offerings. And in July, he first raises the prospect of selling to the financial consultancy, who is the only customer. Now things start to fall apart. So Charlie he had all these prospects, but none of them seemed to be signing up. So he asked around, including us, if anyone knew of a software as a service sales consultant who could give him some advice. And the angel introduction company that had introduced us to Planalot had some contacts. We'll call him Roman. And Planalot contracted with Roman, paid him 7 grand in advance for some advice. Now, the meeting, obviously, with Roman did not go well because the first thing we know is Charlie now sends round to everyone a set of board minutes. And bear in mind, he's a one-man company. The board consists of him, as far as we can tell. And he claims Roman delivered nothing but bullshit. That's kind of what I was expecting him to give anyway. And he's now decided to sue Roman for the return of the 7K. The reports are that Charlie has been aggressive and belligerent. And I'm going to read this out. This is the text from one of the investors to Charlie. Before anything else, I need to ask you if you're well, both in the physical and emotional sense. Are you going through stress or depression or anything else? If this is simply a question of trying to recover an advance payment, I'm confident that with my help, a friendly dialogue would go a long way to resolving this dispute. I had the impression the company, while going through some growth challenges, was still in a fairly stable financial position, but perhaps that is the wrong assumption. To be honest, I'm concerned about your actions and behaviour. I think that's a fair summary. He was going mad, basically.
Yes, I think he started basically to burn his bridges, didn't he?
Yeah, no, it's extraordinary. All he needed to do was talk to the angel introduction company and say, look, this hasn't worked. Can I have my money back or something? And they would have intervened. Suing them, that's just not going to work because your costs are going to be ludicrous. It's just silly. You write it off is a much better option.
Yeah.
So
It all got very unpleasant, didn't it? A nasty atmosphere around it.
well, he mainly disappeared, actually. It was very difficult to get hold of him or to see him.
Yeah.
He seemed to be, he was not British, and he seemed to be disappearing off to the continent quite frequently. Or basically, this company became increasingly virtual. He got employees in Brazil, Argentina, and he was somewhere on the continent. So by September 2018, trials were just not converting to revenue. And actually, one of the reasons they weren't converting to revenue is quite interesting in that he was selling them this project planning software and they just weren't using it. So then he says he's going to start tilting towards SMEs, but so financial services company offered to buy the company, paying 500k plus £1 a user for 5 years. And reminder, Charlie, we are minority shareholders in this thing. Charlie owns 80% of it. And bottom line is, if he thinks that's the best option, it is, because he's not going to be investing in the company or developing anything else. And frankly, he didn't have the wit to invest it to develop anything else.
So effectively, the business had stalled. It had just one large customer. It wasn't getting none of its putative free trials came to fruition. We were told that this business software was now being outcompeted by competitors who had improved their project planning software, and that Planalot was not considered to be competitive anymore, but also he couldn't think of anything else to pivot to.
Yeah, that's the. I mean, when you get into trouble, the CEO has to be able to adapt. And actually, he just couldn't. He was like a rabbit caught in the headlights, suing people who are.
Yeah. So AABB wanted to buy it. We could see that was probably the only way we'd get anything back. And of course, convertible loan from Tech Trumps converted into equity, and the loan had to be repaid. So HMRC claimed that Planalot owed them £30,000, which went into escrow, which we never got. So we received around about 35%, which is better than nothing, but it was all really rather sad. And you look back on it, and as Keith said right at the start, you think, well, what did we miss when we first met with Charlie? Do you want to do this bit, Keith?
Yeah. So actually, after accounting for the fact that the Tech Trumps convertible loan had to be repaid, and then they got a further 6% in equity kickers. So although this company failed, Tech Trumps came out looking absolutely fine. ILOT, received a loss of 72.8%. But the great thing about SEIS is that if you can claim all the tax reliefs, and this calculation assumes that I did, then actually I would have lost almost nothing. Because if I'd invested £100, £50 of that initial investment comes off your tax bill. And you can then claim loss relief of 45%. That's the upper rate income tax on the at-risk capital, which is £50. And that is a further £22.50 coming off your tax bill in the year that you claim for the loss. So that would have been 2022 or 2023. So the total loss relief you get would be £72.50, and I lost £72.80. So actually, I would have come out not too bad.
No.
So finally, just back onto lessons learned. I mean, to me, what it really comes down to is that you invest in the man, and we became when I went through the data, the prospects looked really good. Those first 4 months, when it was growing like a weed, it's the problem was that was just one customer, and then we kind of got him beguiled into thinking, my God, if that's one customer, then if they get 10, they only really needed to get another couple of customers for us to come out even in this, I would have said. The trouble is they never got them, and also he shouldn't have been CEO, and we were kind of aware of this at the time. What are your thoughts, Richard? Do you think this is all hindsight? Do you think actually knowing if we knew what we...
Yeah, I actually, I mean, if you go back to our first couple of meetings with Charlie, he was articulate. He understood, he understood the sector he was in. He understood what the gap in the market was. He could answer all of our questions clearly. There was clear product. And I don't think there was anything in those first meetings that suggested that he couldn't do it. Actually, and I look back on him, I think that was a clear marker. And I actually think that's one of the problems with angel investing. Often you can't tell that people aren't able, either because the product isn't right, or because they don't have the necessary skill set. I think it's actually quite hard to determine if they have deficits in those areas. And I guess, if you're doing it as amateurs, which we were, you don't have the resources to sort of do a whole load of due diligence. I mean, that's the nature of the beast. It's a little bit like wearing a blindfold and throwing darts at a dartboard.
Yeah.
Really difficult to pick out the ones who do have the capability to. I think fairly early on, it became apparent that things didn't seem quite right.
Yeah.
But that was fairly early on after we made our investment.
Yeah. No, him firing the CTO was a big moment.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's true that a lot of companies that tend to fail quite quickly. And actually, both of the companies that are, in our case, in our portfolios, that have gone bust, it was clear quite quickly that things weren't going to plan.
Yeah.
I suppose the thing is that you do have to, as you say, you can't know everything in advance, and you just got to spread the money around and not invest too much too early, because there will be further rounds, and then you can be selective.
Yeah.
So invest in the winners, basically.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Because all you need is one winner, really, one big winner, and to bail you out.
But I think it's very difficult. It's much harder, I think, than my experience is. It's much harder to invest as an angel investor than I thought it was when I began.
Yeah.
Much harder to spot the successful companies. If they are successful, they take much longer to develop and grow than you think they will. And I think it's quite exciting, but I think it's very difficult to do well.
Yeah, I think you have to enjoy the journey to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
And we first started doing this in 2016. That's 8 years ago. Yeah. I've got 13 of these, two losers, and not sure I've got prospects, but no winners. They say the average life of the prospective life of an angel investment is 5 years. Nonsense.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Much more.
It's much more.
Our experience is much more than that.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to add, Richard?
Nope, that's it. Well done, Keith.
Great. Okay. Well, we will be when enough time has passed for
Yes.
everyone to have forgotten
about
the next disaster, and we can talk about it with objectivity. I will do another podcast on our other failure, but in the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and it's goodbye from me, Keith Jordan,
and from me, Richard Wheater. Goodbye. Full disclaimer. The material and information contained in this podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and should not be relied upon for making a business, legal or any other decision. We may own or have a financial interest in any securities mentioned. Listeners should conduct their own research or consult a professional investment advisor before making any decisions regarding topics mentioned on the show. Whilst we endeavour to ensure that the information presented on the show is correct, we make no representations or warranties of any kind, express or implied, with respect to the podcast and website or to any information, products, services or related graphics discussed or presented in the podcast or website. Any reliance you place on such material is strictly at your own risk. You are solely responsible for the investment decisions you make. We will not be responsible for any errors or omissions in the podcast or website, including in articles or postings, for hyperlinks embedded in messages, or for any results obtained from the use of such information, nor will we be liable for any loss or damage, including consequential damages, if any, caused by a reader's reliance on any information provided by the podcast or website. Please do not listen to the podcast if you do not accept self-responsibility for your actions.